There was a moment when I saw this paper from Google, which was about a unsupervised training of a neural network, which learned to pick up and detect cats just by looking at images, right? And so when I saw that, I'm like, I want to work on that. I think this is where future is happening. All crypto is scam. I'm like, look, when the war started in Ukraine, the only way to send money to somebody in Ukraine was crypto. Like there was no other way. And the same story is true in Turkey, in Argentina, like even without a war, right? As you build a better model that understands people better, can manipulate the users more effectively, you can extract more revenue, you can reinvest this revenue into a better model. And so you have this like constant flywheel. People with AI background coming into Web3 now. Like it's a pretty actually very positive sign, people from Meta, from Google, from research coming in because they see an opportunity here to build something in a different way. The challenge right now, it's not a one piece, right? It's not like we're building one thing and it's clearly like how it's shaped, right? If you look up under the hood with Google or Meta, they've built data centers, they've built communication protocols, they've built databases, they've built everything. What we're doing right now is actually we are incubating and accelerating a number of projects that are building out the infrastructure for kind of user-owned AI. I mean, all of those pieces are kind of coming together because like what chain abstraction at the core does, right, is this idea that you should have like a very easy interface to interact with all applications across all chains, right?
Hello à toute l'équipe, j'espère que vous allez bien. Aujourd'hui, on se retrouve pour une nouvelle interview, un nouveau podcast. Cette fois-ci, j'ai le plaisir de recevoir Illia de Near Protocol. Donc vraiment, c'est un plaisir de le recevoir parce qu'aujourd'hui, Near, c'est quand même un sacré pilier dans l'écosystème crypto et blockchain. Ils ont pour habitude de pas mal innover et de faire pas mal de choses très intéressantes, notamment dernièrement autour de l'IA, mais aussi autour de la chain abstraction et de l'account aggregation. Donc, on va parler de tout ça. Il y a un background qui est très très intéressant en IA. Il faut savoir qu'il a travaillé chez Google par le passé, qu'il a fait aussi des études assez intéressantes et qu'il a aussi notamment émis et écrit et participé à des papiers qui ont fait drastiquement avancer l'écosystème IA et l'industrie IA avant qu'elle soit assez popularisée. Donc ça va être l'occasion de traiter de tout ça et on va enfin pouvoir partir. Hello Illia, how is it going?
Bonjour.
Bonjour monsieur. Do you know any like other French words? Like, what do you have in your head now?
I studied French for a bit in high school, but haven't practiced in a while. So.
And like, is it like your first time you kind of like do like a French podcast, like or something like that? Is it your first time?
I have done one like in 2019 or something, but yeah, definitely been a long while. So.
Okay, so I think that will be like a great opportunity to chat with like the French-speaking community because it is quite engaged, and I do think that like Near protocol is very well appreciated like in the French-speaking ecosystem. So I had like a lot of questions coming from the community, so that would be the opportunity to kind of like ask them to you. So before starting, could you maybe introduce yourself? I kind of like did some research about you, and it seems like you have like a very interesting background. To be honest, I wasn't aware like of the role background you had like in AI, especially in Google and all those kind of like companies you worked in before Near. So could you introduce yourself and kind of like show the hidden experience and background you have like from like a very retail investor perspective?
For sure, yeah. So I mean, starting kind of from early time, I'm Ukrainian, grew up there and went to university there. And I got excited about AI actually and machine learning very early on. I think I was 10 years old. I watched this artificial intelligence.
But how the fuck is it possible to get into AI at like 10 years old? Like what did you in your life to get like working on AI at 10 years old? What happened?
Well, I mean, I wasn't working at 10 years old. I was just excited about the idea. I read a lot of science fiction. I did build my first neural network. I built it when I was 14, right? So this is 2004. So I was kind of very excited about this idea. And so I actually studied like in high school already some of the concepts. And so I went to university on working on applied math, which is very much, what you need for machine learning. But at the same time, I mean, my family is from very kind of not from very wealthy background. And so I started looking for a job as well in the first year of university. And so I started when I was 17 working for a machine learning company that was based in San Diego. And that machine learning company actually had a pretty like long history working with lots of different companies, from banks, insurance companies to biomed, etc. And so I had a lot of kind of exposure to just, everything from, credit risk to like how to find cancer from biopsy, right, in DNA. Now, I did move to US, and there was a moment when I saw this paper from Google, which is kind of now dubbed as cat neuron, which was about a unsupervised training of a neural network, which learned to pick up and detect cats just by looking at images, right? Nobody taught it about cats, never kind of seen any any supervision. And so when I saw that, I'm like, I want to work on that. I think this is where future is happening. And so I applied for Google Research to really focus on natural language part of this aspect, right? Because from my perspective, natural language is where you have all the richness of knowledge of the world, understanding of logic. And the way I frame it is, there's thousands of species in the world who can see, but there's only one who can actually like develop the language and communication. And so I joined Google. I led a team that was pretty much doing question answering, machine translation, kind of different language understanding problems. And the challenge is we had interesting research models, right, in 15, 16, but we couldn't actually launch them. They were too slow. They were too hard to train. They were not able to really satisfy the requirements of product teams on latency. And that's where actually transformers, the architecture that powers right now, ChatGPT, Gemini, as well as Midjourney, and other kind of advancements came by is it was a whole, group of researchers coming together with this very kind of basic idea that what if we don't actually read one word at a time, right? Because right now, as humans, we read one word at a time, we kind of process things linearly. And the problem is it takes time, right? If you read a book, it takes, a while. And that's actually not what we want from machines. We want machines to consume data like this. And obviously it leads to a lot of, slowdown in training. And on the other side, machines have a highly parallelized computing power, right? GPUs is, having like tens of thousands of cores. And so you can actually read the whole, article or the whole data set in parallel. Every word, you kind of read it in parallel and then understand it, make sense of it in this procedure, in a way, transform it to the answer. And so that's kind of where Transformer came in. You feed all of the text and then it transforms into the answer or whatever the output you want. And so we developed this, obviously, initially it wasn't like as big a deal as it is right now, but it was, pretty exciting development. It clearly showed you can start doing something that is beating traditional methods. So like for those who remember, in 2018, Google Translate gotten way better. That was actually because of implementing this model. Now, I left to start Near AI. And so Near AI originally was this idea that if we have this model, right, that is really powerful, is able to reason, and we can now train it at scale, we wanted to really change how people interact with computing. And so the way we framed it is we want to teach machines to code, so you don't need to, right? So that everybody in the world can become pretty much software engineer, build software, and in turn, if we're saying, software is the world, this will mean that everybody can pretty much have the same access to this.
It was in 2017, something like that, right?
Yeah, in 2017, that sounded like science fiction, and people thought it was,
now it's like kind of reality in some ways.
Exactly. Yeah. So we were a bit early. So what we ended up doing, we didn't have, hundreds of millions of dollars of funding. And so what we ended up doing, we were trying to collect a better data. So we had a lot of people around the world, especially in China and kind of South Asia and in Eastern Europe, who were working with us. They were computer science students who were doing some data, like they were writing code for us, or they're writing description for code. And we had challenge actually paying them, right? Because from US, it's actually hard to pay into China. Some of the Eastern European countries have also, there's students, some of them didn't have bank accounts. And so we actually stumbled on crypto in a way because we needed it ourselves. We wanted to pay people globally, programmatically, and not, spend like a ton of money on figuring out how to do that. And that was already 2018. We did not find anything, right? The fees on Ethereum and Bitcoin were already high. They were more the fees were more than we were paying people for like tasks, right? So
you needed kind of like very low fees and like low like amount of transaction in terms of dollars and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We were sending like people, 15, 30 cents per, like, I don't know, some like 15 minutes of work, etc. So like small amounts, but like, a lot, right? That people can decide how much they want to work. And so that's kind of where Near protocol started, right? It was, well, we need a scalable, cheap blockchain. So we would use it ourselves. And obviously, if you try to build on Ethereum in 2018, the experience was really bad. You also have this like very weird setup where before you can start using it, you need to buy Ether.
Yeah. It's like how am I supposed to do it?
Yeah, especially when you're like trying to employ people, it's really weird. It's like, imagine you come to your first day of work and they're like, oh, you need to go buy some of the stock of this company or something. Right. So anyway, so that was kind of the concept, like how do we make it simple to use, simple to build, scalable protocol. So yeah, so that's kind of how Near protocol started. And the interesting thing, we're kind of making the full circle now and bringing Near AI back, but we can talk about it in a bit.
Yeah.
Cette vidéo vous est présentée en partenariat avec dYdX. dYdX est la solution décentralisée qui vous permet de trader les principales crypto-monnaies de manière liquide sur mobile et ordinateur. Contrairement à la majorité des exchanges, vous n'avez pas besoin de vous KYC et vous récupérez la majorité des frais que vous payez. Plus de 60 000 personnes utilisent déjà dYdX et j'en fais partie, alors qu'attendez-vous? Scannez le QR code sur votre écran ou utilisez le lien dans la description pour créer votre compte avec un simple wallet et profitez de 5% de réduction sur vos frais. Allez, on repart sur l'interview.
And so when you got into crypto with like Near and Near protocol, like going from Near.ai to Near protocol, like were you already kind of like deeply involved into crypto? Like was it like the first time you had like interest into crypto, or were you kind of like aware of what was going on in the ecosystem?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I obviously was aware there was, blockchains, and in 2017, the whole ICO boom, but I wasn't participating in it, and kind of was trying to avoid that. That seemed very scammy and kind of
I mean, like a lot of AI people do think that of crypto, like that's the issue I had, because I wanted to interview some French teams that are building like AI models. I'm thinking about like Mistral and Hugging Face and everything. And those people are fucking scared of being like associated around like crypto guys.
Yeah.
Like, that is crazy shit. So like, what do you think we kind of like arrived at this kind of critical point? Do you think it will evolve? Like, I think this is something you're working on, obviously, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously all of the problems that crypto has are not helping, right? Between, all the scams, the lawsuits, the, constantly the news of like something hacked, North Korea.
Something wrong.
none of that is helping. And so we need a lot more like, okay, here's actual use cases, here's how it works, and this is why it's truly transformative, right? And like we do have a bunch of stuff like this, right? It's just like it keeps getting drowned by nefarious things.
The meme coins and a lot of things that are like kind of
for people who are like, hey, all crypto is scam, I'm like, look, when the war started in Ukraine, the only way to send money to somebody in Ukraine was crypto. Like there was no other way. Like I didn't know if the bank would actually be there to, next day, literally.
Yeah.
And the same story is true in Turkey, in Argentina, like even without the war, right? Like it's not like there's clearly, even as a basic like payments use case, but then you can obviously extend from there and see how, obviously BlackRock now talks about tokenization. Like it's just way more effective tool for any operational thing. And then from there, the kind of the story now I tell about user-owned AI, and we can go into this. It's really about, any for-profit company ends up in the state where they're starting to kind of, in a way, exploit the user base, right? Because at some point they achieve their target market, and the only thing you can do to continue growing revenue, you need to increase the amount of revenue you extract from each user. And like that's really hard to do without actually changing their behavior around your product. And so what happens is, this came out, like Google had this news coming out, right, that the ads team came to search, asking them to like get users to spend more time on search and do more searches, right? And that's an example of kind of originally, search and ads were separated, and there was a wall, and kind of that wall starting to crumble as this economic pressure that they have. And so there's a fundamental issue with like this gigantic for-profit companies. It's not like somebody individual evil. but like the incentive structures misaligned. And so crypto allows us to redo incentive structures and create new alignment that's more individually aligned. And so that's kind of the story to tell and explain. And then from there to show use cases and actual true, like things that are different and allow for, leveraging blockchain and crypto for actually good.
So before we go into like Near protocol, how it works and the basics of it, so people understand like your vision about it and like your latest progress and updates on it, I wanted to get back to the time you were working at Google. So you were kind of like avant-gardist, like you were ahead of like a lot of people when it comes to AI. And now AI is kind of like a revolution in our society, in tech and everything. So since you were kind of like avant-gardist for AI, like what is the next big thing? Is it crypto, or like are they like kind of fields that we are not super aware of and that are very interesting to you, for example?
Well, I mean, obviously, like I'm in this interesting position of intersection of crypto and AI, and so I do kind of think and spend all my time here. Kind of how do we bring?
So that's your bets.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's less about like, because we use this, like, crypto and like blockchain, Web3, and then AI. It's like it's all labels, right? At the end, there's like core piece of technology that enables something, and then the way you put it together is, at the end results in changes in the world. And so the question is, like, AI, to me, without Web3, is leading us to a very kind of scary place.
Yeah, dark times.
Dark times. And it's, again, I don't think of this as more like, existential risk type things. Although there's some things to think about there as well, but more around just like, as I said, this constant profit generation system and having like a huge flywheel, right? Where as you build a better model that understands people better, can manipulate the users more effectively, you can extract more revenue, you can reinvest this revenue into a better model. And so you have this like constant flywheel. The users spend more time, they leave more data. This data is like gets better at predicting how to change their behavior. And so, and we see this, right? Like the top few companies are starting to break off from Fortune 500, right? It's not anymore like, kind of this big companies kind of moving all together and, they're growing. It's more like this few companies who have this loop that's starting to break off. And then the rest, right, is kind of staying more or less.
Like kind of like 5 companies like owns everything.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's where the scariest, to me, kind of future we moving toward, right? And again, there's like Black Mirror episodes that kind of like, discuss these types of situations.
Even Mr. Robot
exactly
is around this. Yeah.
And so the question is like, okay, well, what can we do, right? And what can we do is we can introduce the principles of Web3, right? Not always you need blockchain, to be clear, right? But the principles are there, like the self-sovereignty, focus on the user, focus on the community, focus on the distributing ownership, not just kind of like, concentrating it. And also like, figuring out how to reward creators. Like one of the things that I think a lot right now about is the future of the content distribution is changing as well, right? Before you had a platform, you have people coming to you to visit your platform. But if you imagine there's an AI agent, be it by a centralized company, or even if it's open source and decentralized, now you're not going to get traffic anymore, right? It's going to be reinterpreting what you're posting, what you're providing, and then providing that to the individual. And if it's run by a big company, right, they're going to capture most of the margin and revenue from this. So what is a different way to do that where my individual model, can take this interview, right, process it, give me the, pieces that I want to and interested in, and then at the same time reward, you, for example, and the kind of the work you've done proportionally to this. And so that sounds like, there'll be micropayments involved. There will be, kind of coordination involved, reputation, kind of identity, all of these problems. Okay, what's the technology that does that?
Blockchain sounds great.
Yeah. Like, I mean, you can do it in Web 2, but actually like already, for example, we have a company that switched from using Stripe to using Near for micropayments because they're saving 100x on fees. From Web 2 to Web 3, they're saving 100x on fees, right?
That's huge, yeah.
Stripe micropayments, 20, 30 cents of base cost, and Near is like fraction of a cent. And so So clearly, you know, Web3 technology is the driver for a lot of this next generation, you know, platforms that are going to exist with AI. And so that's kind of where I think the future is coming together, unless we want to like collapse into this like new company, you know, controlling the world system.
But is the AI industry scared about like those companies like owning everything? And are they kind of aware that crypto and Web3 could be a kind of a solution to solve like some of those problems, or are they thinking like in another way? Like,
so I would say because I mean obviously like AI industry is pretty large as well, and I think there's like a combination of people. We definitely see a lot more AI kind of people with AI background coming into Web3 now. Like it's a pretty actually very positive sign, you know, people from Meta, from Google, from research coming in because they see an opportunity here to build something in a different way. At the same time, a lot of the researchers are interested in the research, right? They don't really care exactly how it's going to like, you know, end up. And so I think, and some people have this view which I don't agree, but they see is like, oh, you know, having it in a centralized company means that, you know, it's safer, right? And so
why?
Well, I mean, their argument is like, oh, you know, if we build something that like can be maliciously used, if we control it, then nobody else will have it, and then we can, you know, study it and figure out how to make it better. And my counter argument to this is, well, first of all, they're not running like a military operation, right? Somebody, you know, taking out weights out of OpenAI office, for example, is not like a impossible task.
Yeah.
But second is, I mean, obviously we have a lot of the, you know, this work happening across the industry, right? So like yes, maybe nobody has like exactly the same level, but, you know, other folks are not far behind. And if somebody kind of really wants to, you know, they will invest in building like comparatively equal solution. The challenge is more in combination of, well, first of all, if you are using it, like people using for malicious use cases already, like even the current like AI models. And so the question is, how do we protect against that, right? That should be the problem to solve, is like, how do we AI proof the systems that we are interacting with? And I don't see that like actually being the thought. It's more like, let's save it and like, you know, let's protect people from using this versus like, how do we protect people actually, assuming everybody will have, you know, somewhat equal level of tooling available. And so that, again, that's where Web3 comes in, or in the concepts of cryptography, you know, reputation, identity, Sybil resistance, all of those things are there, right? The really good example, I actually just read it like a couple of days ago. Email actually collapsed into a small set of whitelisted servers, right? Emails is like data, you know, decentralized protocol that we all like really, you know, refer to when we talk about like protocols. That what happened is, because of the spam, Gmail, Outlook, etc., they all just whitelist the other servers. They don't allow, like if some email comes from a random server, they put it in spam automatically, right? And so this is an example of like a decentralized protocol that didn't have a Sybil resistance in it. And so we have this state right now, like AI resistance, like no AI resistance in our kind of general protocols and systems, be that society or digital. And so that's what we need to start figuring out, is like, assuming everybody has advanced AI tooling, what are the ways to AI proof the systems? And again, like all of the tooling we're building in Web3 is really helpful for this and can provide like really powerful, you know, ways to kind of contain and protect that.
I think the main issue is convincing AI people to work into crypto, because I was talking with like David from Autonolas, maybe you know him.
Yeah.
And it was like really like, there is like not enough like AI people like into crypto, and that kind of like limits us in the growth of like the synergy between AI and crypto. So I think I think that will change, as mentioned, that is changing like kind of a way, but I think that is the most critical part of it, because now like the AI field into crypto is getting better, but it's not mature enough. So yeah, before like chatting about like all the AI projects in town and what are your opinions about like what's developing and everything, I wanted to maybe have you explaining what Near protocol is about now, because it seems kind of like confusing in some ways, because you are covering so many fields, so many topics at the same time. But I think people are confused about like the main narrative about it, because like most of the time people are like, yeah, like this crypto is this narrative, like that's kind of the easy job. But at the end of the day, you're doing more than that. You're kind of like on AI, you are like on data availability, you are like on decentralized network, chain abstraction, account aggregation, and even more stuff, like even data creation with like Near task and everything. So what is Near about? And do you think that the scope of like topics you will cover will expand or like will decrease in some ways? Maybe it's a dumb question, but
I mean, it's a good question. I think it's so here's kind of the way I can explain it, right? We're building the future, right? We're building this future that is not centralized, and the challenge right now is it's not a one piece, right? It's not like we're building one thing and it's clearly like how it's shaped, right? Like it's the same thing as like, if you look up under the hood with Google or Meta, right? They've built data centers, they've built communication protocols, they've built databases, they've built everything. Like, and so you kind of need to do all that to be at that scale. Like if you're assuming we're going to the billion, and this is what our target is, bring this vision of self-sovereignty to 1 billion users. You cannot just be like, oh, we're blockchain, because like blockchains don't get adopted on their own. You need,
but maybe you could rely on other networks to do it. Like this is a choice to be sovereign at every point in time, in a way, no?
I mean, I would love to, and we're partnering with like where we see strong kind of way to work together. We're partnering with Polygon on ZK. We partnered with Eigenlayer on some of the fast finality components. We partnered with a bunch of stuff like with applications, end user applications, right, that have millions of users. So, and this is where like, okay, well, it's a consumer narrative, right? We partnered with applications. It's a roll-up narrative. We partnered on ZK, right? So it's like, like the point there, it's also, all of this is just stories. But at the core, as I said, like we're working towards this self-sovereignty, and self-sovereignty needs to include, kind of blockchain, scalable payments, a way to, easily onboard users, a massive distribution platform, right, through consumer applications. The realization being that, Near on itself doesn't have all the use cases. So we do need to kind of abstract the blockchain so that the users can go to all of the applications, hence the chain abstraction and a lot of the work we've done around the rollups and kind of account aggregation, all those pieces. And at the same time is like AI is literally changing the playing field with how you interact with consumer information, how you going to be building applications, how you're going to be kind of working with one another. And so, and again, if AI is staying in the centralized companies, like all of our vision is not possible. Like Web3 will not exist if there's like 5 companies that control everything, right? Just like naturally. And so you do need to have kind of this user-owned AI vision and work. And again, we are in the best position to do that while also still partner with a lot of people, right? And we will actually even partner with centralized AI companies, because from my perspective, it's not about, destroying centralized companies. It's about creating an even field where everybody kind of equalized, right? And so that's kind of, again, the vision is like bringing all of these pieces together into a, like a cohesive system that works. And, obviously it's still lots of work in front of us, but, we've been showing continuous growth on users, on kind of all of the other metrics, as well as, as you said, we actually are partnering with a lot of other folks who are doing different pieces in this ecosystem.
Is it hard to stay relevant in this kind of like very competitive environments? I mean, I guess your nights are kind of short. Like, how hard is it to keep up? Because this industry is like moving very fast in a way. Yeah. Maybe. I mean, that's my.
So I mean, the way Near itself, and this is where again the people like, oh, Near is in AI, Near is in this, Near is in DA, Near is in all of those things. The thing is, like, under Near, there's actually dozens and dozens of different companies and entities that are working kind of together. right? Like it is a decentralized ecosystem. We have, for example, proximity that's mostly focused on chain abstraction and kind of working with partners there. The DA is also, there's a team focused on that work. There is a, protocol team that's focused on, developing sharded protocol, and kind of that's their main focus. And so there's a team and leaders who are focused on specific efforts and creating the kind of that component pretty much, and then still working, with other leaders to make sure it all works together. And so, yeah, like from my perspective, it's about kind of incubating this ecosystem of projects and protocols and platforms to work together. And to push towards this vision.
Avant de poursuivre cette vidéo, je t'invite tout simplement à rejoindre mon Discord dans lequel tu peux retrouver plus de 10 000 traders actifs. Dans ce Discord, on parle de nombreuses choses, notamment on va tout simplement partager nos analyses, nos graphiques, sur quoi on spécule, les différents airdrops qu'on farm, les news en temps réel qui sont partagées par exemple sur Twitter ou sur différents sites. Enfin bref, c'est vraiment un moyen d'être à jour sur ce qui se passe dans l'écosystème. Et en plus de ça, sur ce Discord-là, je vais partager tout simplement pas mal de données et pas mal de choses que je surveille personnellement, donc des données qui sont importantes à mes yeux et tout simplement moi personnellement ce que je surveille au quotidien. Donc ça permet vraiment d'avoir un suivi en temps réel de moi, ce que je regarde et comment je me positionne dans l'écosystème. D'ailleurs, tu peux retrouver mes performances de 2022 et 2023 sur tous les trades que j'ai partagés gratuitement et publiquement. Donc ici, tu as absolument tout le détail avec les positions disponibles de manière transparente, mes positions actives, mon folio, ainsi que tous les trades que personnellement je prends de mon côté avec le suivi de comment je déplace mon stop loss, comment j'ajuste mon risque, comment je me positionne, etc. J'espère que ça vous plaira. Tout est gratuit. Je vous invite à rejoindre. Tout sera en description, en commentaire épinglé. Et maintenant, place à la vidéo.
You mentioned that you want to create the perfect environment for like AI application to be built on top of like Near. So what it is about, like what kind of like things can you build or make sure happens so they can build on top of Near, like AI wise? Like what are the concrete examples of your actions for developing the perfect environment for those builders?
Yeah, so what we're doing right now is actually we are incubating and accelerating a number of projects that are building out the infrastructure for kind of user-owned AI, right? So this starts with a lot of data projects, right? Everything from kind of crowdsourcing, data labeling, data marketplaces, synthetic data marketplaces, IP for data to reward creators who contributing data, and kind of use cases like this, right? Like how do we build out this? The one interesting topic as well, which is a kind of side note, but how do we also seek truth, right? Like let's say somebody contributed data which is maybe false, or maybe it is like just contradicting a lot of like known facts, but it is true. Like how do we find that? How do we figure this out, right? Because at the end, these AI models are just trained on data. So whatever you put in them, they'll think that's true.
You mean like the truth is evolving and like most of the data will go like
the truth is evolving,
yeah.
And also some people have like diametrically opposing opinions, and sometimes the truth is in the middle. Like how do we actually manage all this? And again, these LLMs are working off, they like statistically just looking at data. So if you tell it that Barack Obama is born in Kenya, enough times, it will think that, or like it will be like flipping between Hawaii and Kenya. And so you need to either decide that you're not including that data or in some way to kind of resolve it. And
because
so
it can create like bias and
exactly,
bad influence.
All the machine learning models are
and
biased. Like they're biased. There's literally in the
by
model
default, they are biased by humans.
Yeah, plus bias. Yeah. So that's a really good example of, again, where crypto economics coming in, right? Think intersubjectivity type thing, where you can decide, or you can have like economic kind of forces that seek truth and actually pay to discover more facts to figure out like how to converge. So again, this is like a data layer. Then there's the infrastructure layer, which is everything from training, like how do we do training, how do we do it in open source way, how do we actually enable more people to train, how do we get compute, how do we get compute at scale, how do we have inference, provable inference, coordinated, like what is the different ways. So projects kind of across each of this, there's a project working on that. There's like a founder and a team that really focus on it. Again, this is example, like, yes, we are working on AI, we're coordinating this whole ecosystem, but there's like a team that's working on different pieces of this puzzle. And then obviously on AI, like there's everything from, applications, there's agents, how do you do payments, how do you do predictions, kind of what Autonomous is doing.
Very interesting. Like this is something I was like not aware of. I mean, I worked in an AI company early on, like in 2017. So I got like really interested into AI and those kind of things. But I wasn't aware about like autonomous agents, and I heard about it because of like David and everything. That sounds very promising. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's definitely like now that we have like the challenge before with AI, it was like you needed a human to actually interpret, right, what the models were saying in a way. Like you couldn't just put them into like autonomous decision making and interaction. They could make decisions, but then they couldn't interact with people. And now agents are able to interact with each other and with people through natural language. That opens up like a huge new surface as well. And you can indeed put them to become autonomous in the sense that you set them as a goal and they're trying to achieve that goal or they're trying to optimize some value function. And so for agents, okay, well, how do they communicate and how do they pay each other? Well, they need some cryptography to communicate, right? Because you don't want to get like kind of screwed by someone in the middle. And you want a way to pay for information, for work done, etc. And so, well, agent cannot go and open bank accounts, right? They can use your bank account, but maybe that's very not secure and kind of isolatable. So ideally, you have crypto account for them to use. They can communicate with each other. They can pay. There's no like bottlenecks. There's no limits. There's no like you can also write a smart contract that defines how they can spend money. How does they manage that? And so you have like all this programmability on top of already agent being kind of structured. So all of those use cases as well, right? There's like few teams working on kind of different aspects of that, as well as just like think of this decentralized social right now is mostly empty, right? There's like few people who are excited about the idea, but the bootstrapping is really hard. But now imagine you actually populate it with AI agents, right? It can be characters from known things. It can be new characters. And they're living their own life. They're creating a social aspects themselves. And now they're pulling in people into their world, into their digital world. And so in a way, it's entertainment, but it's also a really good way to bootstrap a new social network, right? And so things like that, you can now create new mix and mash of things. And it's a platform shift. And so you have an opportunity to also pull in more people off Web 2 as part of this.
That's very interesting because I think the biggest problem of like social file, at least like decentralized social platforms, is that like most of the time there is no content.
Yeah, they're empty.
It's kind of empty.
They're boring. Exactly. Yeah. So this is kind of I tweeted about that idea. There's like few people working on different aspects of this as well. We're talking to, but that's kind of just an example use case of like bringing these pieces together. You can have autonomous agents which are on social, like which are living their own kind of life and interacting, and you can chat with them and you can like see what they do.
Unique characters in a way.
Exactly, yeah. And so you can have then people creating new characters, the characters and NFTs, for example, and so you can have all this economy around that as well.
I think you mentioned that you had like Near task, which is like kind of like data aggregation, data labeling and everything. We have like a French project that is doing the same, which name is Tada. So that was kind of like very interesting. Like seeing like smart actors doing kind of like the same thing. But like, how does Near task and the data coming from is used? Like, is it like open to everyone? Do you have to pay to access it? Like, is it kind of like a layer of data used by all applications built on Near? Because like this is like AI is about like models and data. So
yeah,
like you need like great data to train your models. And I guess this is what you're trying to accomplish, right?
Yeah. So we actually sunset the Near tasks specifically because there's a bunch of really good projects in the ecosystem now in Near that are doing different aspects of this. As I said, like there's a data marketplace, there's the synthetic data, there's crowdsourcing, kind of there's different aspects of that being done by really good teams. And so what we have announced last week was Near AI. So Near AI is bringing back actually what we were working on back in 17, in 18, and that was teaching machines to code and focusing that specifically on Web3 application building. So right now in Web3, there's 7,000 full-time developers by Electric Report, 20,000 like part-time developers, which is less than what one like organization at Google has. Like one product at Google has more developers than whole Web3. Right?
Which is crazy when you think about it.
Exactly. And so if we want to have a competitive environment, right, to Web2, we definitely need to scale up how much application and products we can build. And the good thing is now in 2017, it sounded like a,
crazy stuff.
unimaginable.
Yeah.
Now it's very much imaginable. It works. Like we have already, prototypes that like, show clearly that you can do things.
We'll have like AI agents like going after VCs and saying, yeah, I need fun, bro.
Well, that's maybe V2. Yeah. So V1 right now is you can come in and you can describe your application, right? So let's say you're like, oh, I want a decentralized, freelancer marketplace or a social network. And it actually writes out the specification for that. And then it goes and builds code for that. Smart contracts, front ends.
But it needs to be monitored, right?
So, right. I mean, obviously right now it doesn't work perfectly. But now, I mean, we're going to be releasing some of the, ways for community to engage. But this is where some of the ideas from the crowdsourcing coming in. Right?
Oh,
now
very
we can
interesting.
engage people to help us with both specification as well as the code development to improve the model and have this loop and actually continuously improve how well it does this.
That's super smart.
And if nothing else, it gives you right now, will give you a way to get to a prototype really quickly. So you can go to a VC with already a prototype, just idea. But over time, the idea would to really lower kind of the threshold, right? So that anybody, like, for example, you can like, oh, I want, a decentralized podcast, for example, market, right? Oh, it's like, oh, I can reuse, for example, a decentralized content, creator content platform, build on top of it, here's the front end. So like, oh, actually, I like, I want it to be this colored and I want this 2 more features. I want to share with, my friends automatically, etc. Boom, it added SocialFi into it, has all.
Yeah, Autonomous is kind of trying to work on this, I think. This is very interesting because they were mentioning that they have AI agents to, make sure that like their development pace is way higher than now. So I think this is something we could see more and more in the industry. But yeah, I'm kind of like, I don't know if like it's a good thing or not, like even like from a security perspective, but I think there are like some things that don't really need those kind of audits.
Well,
I don't know.
part of it actually, we can actually do more guarantees on AI generated smart contracts than on human generated, right? Like one of the areas of research is how do we have provable smart contracts such that you have, set of requirements, for example, like, hey, it doesn't lose money. There's no way to like extract or something. And so then this rules are pretty much enforced when
like
the smart
requirements.
Generated. So there is actually, this is one of my kind of maybe more like medium to long term points is that as we like one of the risks actually that some of the people who want to keep AI closed highlight is that you can use you will be able to use AI models to find vulnerabilities in code and then break into stuff, right? And it is indeed like something that to be aware of that as we advance some of this, the models become pretty good at finding actually vulnerabilities. And the 2 points here. Well, first of all, one, that current models are already doing this. So like actually there was already found vulnerabilities if you scan with like GPT-4 or Anthropic models.
It's not perfect,
find vulnerabilities.
but that's a start. Yeah.
But the second one is, well, actually the best way to make sure that is not happening is make sure that everybody has availability to this model, because then you can scan everything you write with that model immediately. But even better is kind of, we will need to stop writing code. Humans are inherently flawed, right? And we have issues, like we leave problems in the code. And so we do need AI generated code. Like that is actually will be the safest way to do this. And the way you generate this code needs to be by AI that is open source and validated that there's no actually sleeper agents inside the AI model that injects problems into the code. Because that's one of the other issues is if you're using closed source model, you have no idea what it was trained on and what exactly it's actually doing internally. And you're not able to, know even if there is like some specific vulnerability was interjected through the AI model itself. So I think like this is kind of actually, to me, that's actually a point of for open source AI and open source software in general, that like we need to actually have as much open source, auditable and AI generated by auditable models as well, to make sure we have higher quality of software coming in, as more people will be able to use AI now to break into stuff.
Yeah. I wanted to have like your opinion about like the AI projects in sound. So we've seen that BitTensor kind of like had like a huge market shares in terms of like market, I would say, attention, and like in terms of like valuations and all those kind of things. So We've seen also that like Fait, Ajax, Ocean kind of like merged all together to create like ASI. What are your views on what they are building? Is it like inspiring to you? Are there great? Are there like some bad stuff? Like what are like your views about like what's building like AI wise on blockchain so far?
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a whole host of new projects coming in by people who are like AI people coming from academia and from industry who are doing really interesting things. I mean, I don't want to comment on specific projects.
yeah. But,
But
maybe you have like ones you prefer. Like I'm not here like to share any project or whatever. You know, I need like from a technical perspective. Maybe there are like some projects or some things that are very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so we're going to be announcing some of the kind of partnerships and projects we're incubating, which are, from our perspective, really interesting and form kind of the stack of future user-owned AI industry. So, stay tuned for that. But I mean, generally speaking, right, it's important to have a lot of these primitives, but at the same time, like it'll take some time for this to shake out because like also, the first versions of everything are not going to be like perfect, right? And so the question will be more about who is moving fast, who is iterating, who is actually adopting and kind of integrating good ideas. And so that's kind of I'm more for like as general principle, don't look at the like specific state of a project now. Look at more of what has been their trajectory so far and kind of where they're going. And so that's why, I mean, there's like some projects that are really exciting from a trajectory perspective, and some projects have been kind of in this state for a while. And yes, kind of they had AI from before, but then it's not like the trajectory wasn't there in the first place. So that's kind of how I judge. But again, like I don't want to comment on specific projects.
Do you want? I mean, are you trying to also convince like Web2 companies to get like on Near for those kind of stuff? Because I think you can have like a seamless integration using JavaScript and everything, because those Web2 people are into JavaScript most of the time. So that would be the easiest way to access like blockchain and probably Near. So are you trying to also convince like popular solutions, like Web2 very popular solutions?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of things, right? I mean, we are working on some partnerships as well with, more standard kind of Web2 AI companies, both to use them as suppliers for some of the Web3 stuff, as well as the other way, like have some of the things that Web3 has for them. I think for like kind of next level, or for like application level, I think we're a little bit too early kind of as industry, honestly. That's where like I think everybody's expectations are super high right now. And like it
like always, like every cycle we are like super.
Yeah. So that, I mean, that's just like, like my recommendation again for everyone is like, well, you need to understand that these things take like a year, right, to mature. And so we're probably like in 3-4 months as like just starting to get like some of the things right. That's why, again, the trajectory is the more important part than like a specific point in time. But yeah, I think like we'll start getting more like on application level and some of those integrations a little bit later on. But what I'm really excited is like this idea of a kind of really small teams, really small companies that's using AI tooling to start taking on kind of big enterprises, right? And I'm not talking about like more traditional software stuff. I'm talking about like more traditional physical, like, for example, how do you build a new, import-export business? Well, you probably don't need to build like a huge clerk office and, accounting and all those, right? It's all can be done by AI now. And so can you create new businesses that are more effective, more efficient, have less overhead, and in turn, the products are cheaper. And so you can actually like partner up, provide distribution for more people. So things like that, like I think we'll start seeing some of this. And again, their reliance on closed AI models is actually extremely dangerous, because you have no idea what that model will output to you, tomorrow, and how it's going to like affect your business. And so if you're building a business and that's like AI is at the core, you want to use AI that's on your side. That's actually like, you control as much as possible.
Yeah.
And so, open source and user-owned AI is kind of the prerequisite for something like this, where you build kind of, your business around the core AI. kind of capabilities.
Cette vidéo vous est présentée en partenariat avec dYdX. dYdX est la solution décentralisée qui vous permet de trader les principales crypto-monnaies de manière liquide sur mobile et ordinateur. Contrairement à la majorité des exchanges, vous n'avez pas besoin de vous KYC et vous récupérez la majorité des frais que vous payez. Plus de 60 000 personnes utilisent déjà dYdX et j'en fais partie, alors qu'attendez-vous? Scannez le QR code sur votre écran ou utilisez le lien dans la description pour créer votre compte avec un simple wallet et profitez de 5% de réduction sur vos frais. Allez, on repart sur l'interview.
We haven't mentioned the chain abstraction side of Near, which is like very interesting on my end. And also you mentioned that AI could simplify the crypto UX because like so far it's for normies is like very hard to access and use. So based on AI and what you're doing like on chain abstraction, what would be, I would say like the new way to use crypto like in 1 to 3 years from now? And also could you like give us more details about like what you're doing like chain abstraction wise?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll say like you can actually do it now. So if you go to Mint-based wallet, they have a AI tab where you can type in like, you know, buy.
What's the site? Sorry,
it's wallet dot let me get it. wallet.mintbase.xyz. So it has a passkey sign up. It has AI pretty much prompt where you can like type in, you know, swap this token or, you know, find like mint an NFT, and they are launching. So they already have it on kind of testnet, the integration with through chain abstraction to do it across chains, right? So
that would be awesome. Like just put it like 90% of my USDT into this, 1% into that, 2% into that.
Like,
then
like swap BTC for USDT.
DeFi strategies, that would be crazy.
Yeah, so they're working on all that, and then there's a dApp, which is like aggregating. You know, they have 15 layer 2s, they have 170 applications, and so they're going to be adding as well. You know, but what you said, like, hey, you know, farm all the airdrops. Or, yeah.
Please,
so those are like
already, like 2,000 accounts.
Yeah, like create 2,000 accounts. Yeah, farm 2,000, like 5,000 airdrops. But that's like, I mean, all of those pieces are kind of coming together because like what chain abstraction at the core does, right, is this idea that you should have like a very easy interface to interact with all applications across all chains, right? Now, to enable that, there's like complex tech. You know, there's chain signatures with MPC. There's relayers that you know, actually route transactions. There's multi-chain DEXs that need to like, you know, have intent architecture to actually execute all this. There's solvers, but all of that is abstracted out. And so you as a user just say like, I want, you know, interact with that smart contract, or I want to, you know, swap this thing, etc. And then from a interface perspective, like it's still hard to, you know, it can be still hard to navigate now the whole Web3, right? Now you have like, you know, hundreds of applications that you can do. And so this is where a natural language interface comes in and can form these transactions that are then spanned to all the chains. And so that there, I mean, obviously you still have UIs as well with kind of decentralized front ends and what like dApp built a lot of the custom UIs. Or you can have like, hey, you know, swap this, you know, lend that, mint this, etc. Buy me the cheapest, you know, NFT on OpenSea, etc. Right? So all of that is kind of, you know, happening right now. There's like a bunch of teams kind of working on different pieces of this, but it's all like coming together in some of this wallet experiences.
I think that's great. I think this is really what we need so far. That would be kind of like a revolution inside of crypto, because like we haven't seen like such kind of like changes for a while now. I would say like UX wise. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most probably kind of unique experiences right now is actually inside Telegram. So Hot built this wallet that has apps, and they just launched base support. So you're able to like from a Telegram wallet interact with Near and base and not pay any fees. Like you use Hot, their token, to kind of as a gas thing, but then you're also mining it yourself, right? So it kind of offers this like account abstraction, chain abstraction, all of this. They also launching 2FA to protect your account, etc. And it's like a very unique experience. And they have applications inside it as well. And this has like over 7 million users now actually interacting with it, like 2 million daily actives right now. So it's insane numbers as well. So those are just like good examples of like when all of these pieces come together, right? You get like an amazing experience and amazing scale. But to make that power that, right, there was a sharded blockchain at the bottom, right? That's like what Near protocol originally started with. So there's all of this kind of, obviously frameworks. There's chain abstraction. There's, kind of all
That's great tech.
Pieces,
that
came together to really power such an experience.
I think I took a lot of your time, and we talked about like a lot of promising thing. So thank you for that. But before ending this podcast, I wanted to have you like on what are like the biggest problems in your opinion to address in the ecosystem, like from a technological perspective, but also from like an investor perspective. Because, for example, lately we've seen like very high FDV with like very low market cap and all kind of things. We've seen like a lot of very scary topic and interesting problems. And I wanted to have like your views on that, like what matters the most to you, and what are the biggest concerns you have, like from like an industry perspective?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think technically Near, but also like broader ecosystem. I mean, we're making progress. I think we have the foundation for the things for the applications we need to do now. And I think the challenge is really like applications are not getting funded. Like even with, millions of users, some of these applications struggling to fundraise, right? And so
why, in your opinion?
Because like people look for an infrastructure project and a new layer 2 because the valuation, the FDV will be higher. And so it will look like they made a lot of money. And applications, are actually valued at their users and actual economy that they build. And so it doesn't get as big FDV, et cetera, right? So I think the kind of this search for like high FDV and like this can be like kind of skewing everything. And in turn, like, the infrastructure, like we have, 500 of like layer 2s at just like EVM, right? And they all got funded. And then we have like two applications pretty much right now, right? That's kind of the state. And again, like on Near, like specifically, we've brought in Web 2 applications with a lot of users to Near. So outside of HOT, everything else was existing applications. And, the way people react to this is like, oh, that's Web 2, it's like, no, this is actually like real users that came. They're not crypto users, yes, but that was the whole point. The whole point was like mainstream adoption. You want not like
you're saying that all the time, and then when it arrives, you're like, fuck it.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of the challenge that we've seen, like kind of industry wide, right? Is that you bring real users and people like, nah, I want like another EVM layer 2. So, and again, like there's use cases where you clearly need like a layer 2 and like this, you have customizations that are specific to what you're doing that really enable that. But at the same time, yeah, like we need to kind of really, start moving to investing more in end user applications and understanding the value of users. Actually, one example, so Oleg from Sweatcoin uses this back in 2001 and also before that. Like every time the core infrastructure, so Intel chip had a huge spike, and then it's been on a decline after this. Then Cisco had a huge spike and then been on decline after this. So the people like overinvest into infrastructure and
get
then
fucked at one point.
Yeah, and then the value gets captured above that, right, at the stack, right? And so that's kind of what we have. We have this spike right now into overinvesting infrastructure, and the applications is where a lot more value will be captured. So I think that's really just important to for people to understand and kind of allocate again from a more investment perspective accordingly.
Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciated this moment, Illia. Maybe you have like final words for the people who watch like the entire podcast and for like the French-speaking audience?
Well, I think there's a lot of exciting stuff that's coming, both in the ecosystem, but also Web3. And I'm inviting everyone to test out the applications. Try HOT, Sweatcoin. And excited to see how we can advance the industry forward in the next 12 months.
Thank you very much.